All right, welcome to the Gateway API meeting for March 6, 2023. As we've mentioned, this is the first experimental time slot that is trying to be more East Coast and Europe friendly. Hopefully, it looks like we're already getting some different and new attendees, so really great to see that. And we'll see if we continue. With that, this is just like any other Kubernetes contributor meeting where we encourage everyone to be kind to each other, really adhere to the Kubernetes Code of Conduct. This agenda, which I'm presenting, is intended to be editable by anybody. So if perchance you see this and you want to add something, don't hesitate to add something to this agenda or any future agenda. And also feel free to add comments in chat or speak up as necessary. Really want everyone to feel like they can participate. With that said, let me go ahead and get into the first couple items, which are both mine. The first one, I tried to write out a doc that describes how I think Gateway API can interact with multi-cluster services. I actually had this doc sitting around for a while, but then I disappeared on vacation for a bit and came back to it and said, I should probably share this more broadly and try and get some feedback from the rest of the community. With that said, I think this is a natural follow-up to some discussions that Sanjeev started earlier, maybe a couple of weeks ago at a meeting where he was trying to show the whole scope of multi-cluster and Gateway API. And I know that scope may end up being larger than the current multi-cluster service API, but it seems like the most natural, simplest starting point is defining how Gateway API interacts with the existing multi-cluster service API. So in this case, in the scope of this document, I'm trying to structure the document so it looks and feels similar to a GET, because I think this will probably eventually make it into a GET format. But the main goals are, just trying to ensure that we have a clearly defined interaction between Gateway and multi-cluster services. And maybe the most important non-goal is we don't want to make any significant changes to either API as a part of this gap. At least that was not my intention. This is really just trying to say, given the two APIs as they exist to get today, how do they interact? With that said, I'm thinking many of these things will not be too controversial, but happy to be wrong with any of those. One, I think the most commonly used thing would be forwarding to a service import. So instead of forwarding to a service inside a cluster, you can forward to a service import, and that is interpreted as forwarding to all endpoints associated with that service across all clusters in, I think the fleet is the appropriate multi-cluster term. I'm not sure, but the group of connected clusters as far as multi-cluster services are considered. So really just a drop-in replacement for service, but instead of forwarding to cluster local endpoints, it refers to all endpoints within the set of connected clusters. Then for the routing to specific clusters, similar to what multi-cluster service would recommend, or similar to what we're doing for traffic splitting with single cluster services, I think the way to do that would just be to have different service imports or different services. So with single cluster traffic splitting, we'd have different services. The same idea would apply here for multi-cluster services. So you can imagine store west, store east, and those might only be exporting imports from clusters in a western region and an eastern region, for example. Then the last thing I wanted to cover here is cross namespace references with reference grant. I think this is a great use for reference grant, so we might as well make use of it. So just like we enable cross namespace references to services with reference grant, I think the same would apply to service imports. I think that's really the high level idea of this doc, taking anywhere where we use service and saying the same concepts apply to service import. And then finally, I don't see any of the mesh. I think Keith is on here, maybe. Yes, but this is probably worth some more discussion on Gamma side. This is the area that I'm least confident about, but I feel like you should be able to differentiate between a broad set, a cluster local service and a multi-cluster service via service import. So the idea being that attaching to a service import is a different thing than attaching to a service. I know many meshes don't make that distinction today, so this is probably going to need some more discussion within Gamma. But just that's the Gamma side of it. I don't know, Keith, if you had anything to add or any addition, or anyone else from mesh side on this.
Yeah, I can say that from an API perspective, this definitely feels right. I think you're correct though in that we'll probably need to take a look at some of the particular ways that this will play with different mesh implementations. But like I said, it feels like the right direction. Not feel comfortable. Like if there was a delta necessary, it feels like it would be correct to have mesh implementations make that change. So yeah, I will put this as an agenda topic for the Gamma meeting tomorrow.
Great, thanks. And then the rest of this, I think, is fairly straightforward. The main changes here are service import would be recognized as extended conformance, and then service import would also be included in Gamma gaps with the same extended conformance, and then some kind of clarification that services, as they're specified in Kubernetes, refer to endpoints within the same cluster and are not intended to be referring to multi-cluster services. So that's a whole lot. Any thoughts or comments on this before we move on? Cool. I'll take Shane's thumbs up. But anyone, please feel free to add feedback on this. If not, I'll just probably go ahead and transition this as is to a GEP, but also interested in what feedback from Gamma meeting is tomorrow. Cool. All right, the next thing for me is the contributor ladder. The contributor ladder is a doc I shared last week. And I think there's been no real comments on this other than Nick is +1, and I think Shane is as well on this one. So I think this probably doesn't really need a gap, is my guess. I feel like this can just translate directly to docs, but just more of a procedural question. Do we feel like we should go through the gap process for this or just doc update?
I don't personally see why we can't make it a doc update, and then if somebody takes issue with it, make the changes necessary. Like if we agree, this seems reasonable. But I think the question is more for people who haven't, it's more for y'all. So.
Yeah, and one thing, while I'm here, I realized that many of the people on this meeting were not on the meeting we discussed this last week because of time zone issues or whatever else. So I want to highlight really quickly that we are defining with this doc and soon to be doc update, a formal way to become a recognized contributor with a formal role within the Gateway API project. We have tons of opportunities here. This project has so much work still to do, and we appreciate everyone who's been helping us out. So if you've been interested in getting a formal role and contributing more within Gateway API, we would love to have you. This doc really just tries to formalize what that looks like, but don't hesitate to reach out to any of the maintainers, Shane, myself, Nick, anyone else. And yeah, Dave, you've got a good point. We do need to make it a little bit more clear how to actually become a reviewer. At this point, I think we've basically just said, hey, just reach out to a maintainer. Would be open to more guidance on this. Really, I think for reviewer and approver, what we've done is we've just linked out to the upstream Kubernetes community guidance. because our definition of reviewer and approver is largely the same as upstream. But I agree that it's not obvious what you do if you want to become those. But at a high level, please just reach out. We'll try and get a better process in line soon. But I know there's a lot of really qualified people that have already been doing the work of certainly at least reviewer, especially in these. I think of conformance tests, especially. We've got some really good reviewers on there. So and also GEPs. So if those are areas that you're interested in or documentation, please don't hesitate to reach out. We want to get more people involved and ensure that we have a really healthy community here. Yeah. Cool. Any last thoughts on this one? All right. With that, I'm not sure. I think this is
David.
Yeah,
David. Okay. Thank you.
David Bosley. Yeah, I'd raised this discussion a few weeks ago, so I just wanted to follow up and make sure we get enough eyes on it. It's just proposing adding a ALPN field, which would allow for routing based on the ALPN extension in the TLS handshake for the TLS route. There's been like some comments on it. I think the general direction is to write up a GEP and have it as an experimental feature, but I just want to make sure we get enough people looking at it.
Interesting. I just, for John's follow-up question, that is S&I a fit here?
Yeah, I guess I never followed up on that, but for our use case, we do use S&I for like multi-tenancy. And then beyond that, we use ALPN for routing to different services for each tenant. So
I would suggest, yeah, I did see this one. I can't remember if I commented on it. I think it was like,
yeah, at the very bottom, you were the last comment.
what did I say? Yeah, I think this is what I was about to just say. I would say respond to some of the things like that are still not responded to. Like, I think it may just be John's one thing, but I think you're ready to try a GEP, provisional, and start getting a little bit more technical about what you want to do and see how the response is to that.
Sure.
Because I think where we're at with this is it's mostly like, okay, it's going to be an extended thing, but okay. And yeah, it's just a matter of starting to make the motion.
Yeah, I would say I would emphasize it. I agree with Shane here. I would emphasize it's important to go in kind of baby steps here, like add a bit more detail, start a GEP with that. Don't, if, sometimes it'd be tempting to go away, write out everything and then come back. And then, like if you can just do smaller updates, smaller incremental changes, then we can get, intermediate feedback along the way and make sure that the whole community is on board with the direction we're going.
Yep.
Yeah,
add the what and the why without any how for the first iteration. That's something we've been doing a lot more of the last year, and it seems to have fairly good results. We've at least had some. It just makes it so that you don't have to do everything in one PR, because the bigger a PR is, the inevitably longer it will take to get it to merge. So when we say what and why, there's like a TLDR section, a summary, some goals, non-goals. Fill those out first. Don't worry about how you're going to implement it at all until everybody has alignment on that. Right? Makes sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess a PR with like that initial stuff in it.
Yeah, and if you need any help whatsoever, we're on Kubernetes Slack. I'm at Shane, Rob, Scott. Just ping us. Actually, just ping Rob, like constantly for anything that you need. No.
And also whenever Shane and I say ping us, you're welcome to DM us, but also very welcome to just
pull us in.
Mention us in SIG Network Gateway API channel. That way everyone can be part of the discussion. It doesn't, none of this is really intended to be confidential. Just we're saying we're open to chat. However,
yeah, the purpose is just say, please don't hesitate to reach out for help. We were happy to help.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Shane, I think that leaves you up next.
All right. I figure since we have a little bit of a different crowd here, we'll do an introduction. So this project is called Blixt, which is a Swedish word meaning lightning. Originally, it was an experimental layer 4 load balancer using eBPF as the data plane at Kong. Experimental meaning literally just kind of a toy. What we're doing with it now is actually it's already being set up to be contributed to Kubernetes SIGs and become, because its control plane is entirely gateway API as opposed to like ingress or anything like it's entirely gateway API based control plane. It's going to become the testing and reference implementation for like layer 4 in gateway API. So it's going to become a gateway API repository. You actually probably saw that on the contributor doc. So that's just a little brief introduction to what it is. If you have more questions, please feel free to reach out in the Gateway API Kubernetes Slack channel or in discussions and issues on the repository. I wanted to give a quick update on where things are with it. We recently had our first pre-release, which has UDP route support, and it's not completely finished or anything like that. And we are currently tracking a couple of different major tasks for our next release, which is TCP support, which is almost done. And then so TCP route support ultimately with Gateway API. And then we are going to change this may be Greek to some people, but we are going to change our loader for our eBPF programs from Aya, which is our current loader that's just a Rust program loader, to BPFD, which is an open source loader that has like cool tools for managing BPF programs, including it can kind of tell you if like there's other BPF programs already on the system, and it'll like give you the ability to kind of organize in what order you want the BPF programs to actually run. Cool stuff like that. But the main thing that we like it for is your eBPF program is also a CRD. You can literally load your eBPF programs with a custom resource and just say, here's my eBPF program, here's the image for it, and that has the eBPF bytecode, which is super cool. So those two things are the next kind of bigger things before our next release. And then the last thing is we're migrating to CNCF, and that has been taking a long time. So we recently, literally just in the last couple of days, decided to short circuit that by switching our license from GPL v2 for the data plane, which is required for eBPF for those who aren't aware, to dual licensed GPL2 plus BSD2 clause. This is the current allowed kind of GPL combo license that CLAM uses. And so we expect that now that we've done this, we should be able to kind of fast track into get it into Kubernetes SIGs finally. So that's just kind of a really fast update on everything going on with that project. Hopefully we will be in Kubernetes SIGs soon, and hopefully you'll start seeing it showing up in our conformance sooner rather than later. We're tracking for it.
Great.
Just want to make
thanks
sure I
for that,
understand.
Yeah, go ahead, Damien.
Just want to make sure I
questions.
understood what's going on here. So Blixt is a gateway API implementation that is going to live in the gateway API repository.
It has its own repository, but it'll live in Kubernetes SIGs. It will not be
Okay.
allowed for production usage. We're explicitly trying to avoid the Nginx ingress kind of path where it ended up becoming supported heavily. In fact, we've talked about things like putting a timeout on the actual software so it will shut down over time to deter people from trying to use it in production. It's meant for testing. And one of the biggest things we want to do with it is plug it into our CI. There's a lot of things. It actually is kind of at the center of a lot of different ideas and things coming together. But like some of the things on the side that this helps with is like, we're trying to help a little bit with getting more Rust into Kubernetes SIGs. There's Rust RS and CNCF, but Kubernetes, this will be the first project in Rust in Kubernetes SIGs. We're trying to explore eBPF more in Kubernetes. There's also some exploration going on in KPNG where they're adding a backend for kubeproxy in eBPF. And then we also want to plug this into our CI and use it to teach us a little bit more and help us with our conformance for L4. That's been a big goal of mine for like a long time, where I really want to see L4 get into at least beta, but I'm trying to get it to GA, and we're starting to have more use cases, and this is just going to help with that by having kind of hands-on experience kind of putting together an L4 solution in Gateway API.
Yeah, well said, and I should, echo everything Shane said, and also say like when we were talking about adding this to Kubernetes SIG's project, if you go back through the SIG network mailing list, I think the big requirements that were added were that this should never ever be used for production. It needs to have mechanisms and documentation in place to prevent that kind of usage, and it should be clear that this is meant to further the development of Gateway API, not meant to be used in production ever for any reason. I know this is a really hard thing to do because for example, kind was never intended to be used in production, and yet here it is. So I think we've tried to be even more aggressive on that stance. And then for the motivation, I really want to highlight what Shane said with the L4 side of things. It's been really hard to find something that can help drive L4 forward. So having some kind of implementation that we can kind of use to prove out our concepts is really helpful. We've had a lot of L7 implementations that have been really good at helping us prove out L7 concepts, but it's been harder to define the same with L4. I don't know, does that help?
Yeah, it's helped me come up to speed. I know Envoy Gateway just recently added TCP route, UDP route, gRPC route support, and so still trying to understand, like, right, Gateway API has a dozen different implementations, and like, why is this particular implementation the one that is used to, well,
For conformance
understand the
tests, it's
purpose
because
behind it.
yeah, for conformance tests, we specifically wanted to avoid what we thought would be, what's the right word, Rob? We wanted to stay away from what we thought would be controversial technology choices. So like Envoy versus Nginx, regardless of the fact that Envoy is CNCF, just because this would seem to play favorites. So we figured that Linux was very neutral. That was another bit from this. I mean, it's a small kind of piece of the puzzle, but if that helps to fill in some of those blanks.
Yeah, and I think the point about that there are implementations. Envoy Gateway has been amazing at getting full conformance of all features, and I know we really appreciate that. I think the idea with Bleakst, and Shane, correct me if I'm wrong, was the idea that there could be some kind of experimental playground where you could test out features before they even became, so this is not something like we need to have any kind of backwards compatibility guarantee. This is just going
Right.
to forever be
Gives us a lot of
playground.
freedom.
Yeah.
And it's fun for people too. That was another big driving factor in this. Like we've gotten a lot of contributors like just that wanted to join in just because they're interested in the technology. Kubernetes, Rust, eBPF, like that just makes people go, yeah, that's interesting. So.
But I do want to be very clear. This project has no intent, and we are trying to do everything we can to ensure that it does not and will never compete with any of the official implementations that people are working so hard on. This is not
Correct.
intended to do that.
It won't currently, and if it ever gets to a point where it's easier to use anywhere else, but in the really limited sense that it is, we intend to put something like a kill switch on it, where it'll be like,
Cool. Yeah, good comments. Open to other ideas for how we can further limit this. Yeah. Thanks.
And yep. Any other questions or something? Go ahead real quick. Otherwise, I've got one more thing. Okay. So go ahead and open that GEP if you would, please. Conformance profiles GEP has had a few iterations now, like I think 4 or 5 PRs. This is going along this has been moving along quickly using the whole like very small iterations kind of concept, and it's been doing pretty good. It is in provisional state. For those of you who aren't familiar, we also called this conformance levels at one point, but it's called conformance profiles here to not confuse it with support levels. I would definitely, anybody who's, well, probably everybody on this call, but like most people who are using the conformance test suite, should probably check this out, give it a look over. I think plenty of people on this call already have. But more or less, this describes the system in which we would have profiles, which you can subscribe to and say, this is the profile that I want to test. When you use the test suite, it runs, and then it ultimately produces, and you can, if you scroll down, a conformance report. There's some examples in YAML of that. And those performance reports can be submitted back to Gateway API for basically for certification and recognition, and badges, little markdown badges you can put on your repos. And so that is underway. There are a few people who are actively contributing to it. Leor and Arco are also contributing to this, and Sanjay. And we're just kind of all getting it to the point where I think we're about ready to call it maybe experimental. But I would, as it's kind of sitting here right now, I encourage everybody to go look through it. We really would love to have your collaboration on this, and feel free to make changes. Like feel free to make a small PR and be like, hey, I think this is a better idea, or I think you should add this. That kind of thing is very wanted. One of the big things that we for sure know we need is we're not sure how the display layer is going to look yet. So once you report your conformance, that's all, this could all change. Like everything you're looking at here, it's provisional. It may change significantly, but we've got the basic idea of what we want to do. So we know that we want to submit these. We don't want to add infrastructure for this. So we just want to submit them to the repository for now. And then later we'll see how that goes. But when you do that, we know we want to provide like a badge that says, I'm conformant with layer 7, conformant with layer 4, conformant with mesh. But we don't really know what we want. We want to have some kind of a nice display layer somewhere. And the current idea is to put it in the implementations page as like a header or a widget under your implementation that gives like a nice human readable, like not this is machine readable. This is meant to be used by a program. Nice human readable like display of like what your conformance is, what features you support, that kind of thing. So we want something like that, but I am not a front end person and like not good at designing. If you asked me to make a website, you are going to get like an HTML BSD man page. So looking for some kind of help from somebody who has a knack for making things look nice, to come in and say how the display level is going to work in particular, but definitely want to encourage people to just put in PRs in general and just read this over because it'll affect everyone.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. Trademarks in place for conformance. I don't think so, but I know we have had some discussions with SIG and some of the people that have been involved in Kubernetes overall conformance with this. They recommended following the same general process that Kubernetes conformance follows, which is that it's self-reported reports that are filed centrally. Those reports are really actually just test logs that are uploaded and instructions for how they ran the conformance tests. I imagine ours will actually be slightly more structured in the sense that, like Shane and others have proposed here, will actually have a better overall summary than just test logs. I'm also really excited
to the next step there, I think, because the
Yeah.
log thing's a little rough.
Yeah, it is. And I think one of the concepts that is different with our idea of conformance from upstream conformance is that there are features, it's not just you're conformant or you're not. There's a lot of middle ground here of I'm conformant with everything that's core, but maybe not everything that's extended. And so our tests need to document that and represent that well. I'm also really excited about being able to report conformance status on the implementations page. We have a lot of implementations and that list is only growing. Thank you, everyone. But I really am looking forward to, for the sake of someone coming to Gateway API and wanting to try it out, being able to say, oh, hey, here are the fully conformant versions. Maybe I'll start there. That seems like a really good way to differentiate implementations.
Yeah, and not just that, but like you guys will get badges and stuff, which are cool because you can put that on your repository. But we will all get an understanding, especially like when we're trying to develop new features and stuff like that. We've in the past had to go into Slack and been like, hey, who's implementing this? And or who's got this, feature supported and that kind of thing. This will help, probably not perfectly, but this will help us to be able to actually just literally go look and see who's implementing what, or who supports what features and stuff like that, which will be great from a maintainer perspective compared to what we've had to do in the past. So,
just mentioning the trademark stuff, I would follow up with someone, I don't know who, because the whole point of conformance in Kubernetes was to say like, hey, I can say I'm Kubernetes conformant, and then I advertise Kubernetes on my implementation website. And I think the trademark is there in places to prevent people from saying that they support Kubernetes when they actually don't. Essentially, I think like doing these conformances then allows you to advertise those logos. And
yeah, sounds good.
so,
I'll be putting out a so I am personally talking with SIG, but I would encourage other people to come to the meetings and stuff. I'll be putting out a message on the SIG mailing list today, basically kind of letting them know where we're at since we're in provisional. If you want to, I would definitely, we have a to-do list at the top. You can scroll to the top, and basically these are the things we must do before we call this thing implementable. If you would add a quick PR, just basically putting in a note that like we need to basically make sure we're not at odds with Kubernetes conformance, that'd be great. If not, I can do it. But it's a good point, so we should put it on the to-do list.
yeah, just think of the use case of someone says they implement Gateway API, but they don't. So how do you prevent them from advertising?
There's a note, yeah, there's a note in here about that, where for this step, and I'm maybe later, but there is a note in here not too far down that basically says we're not going to try to deal with that. And my reasoning for that so far, and you can argue with me about it, but my reasoning for that so far is twofold. One, it's going to be really hard to try to catch proprietary implementations like falsifying the information. And so that's not fair to everybody else, certainly. And two, I think that the reputation loss for getting caught doing that, like if you do that and then eventually get caught, your reputation loss in the Kubernetes community is going to be like I don't think it's worth it. But again, I'm willing to be argued with, but I said for right now, maybe we don't worry about that because I just can't see anybody being willing to do that and putting their company's reputation on the line to be that defamed by lying about it. So
on the varying levels of conformance compatibilities, so like certain projects are going to be intentionally very specific, or like have specific use cases. So like a project like Envoy Gateway will always strive for full conformance, but if someone wants to go and implement a production version of Blix, Blix Pro, if you say, that's just specifically for L4, like they would never implement an HTTP route. So, but they're still fully conformant in this narrow areas. Like they have all the L4 conformance compatibility. So I'm not sure how you're gonna, maybe the gap.
that is a profile. That is what a profile is considered, is that area, that category. So layer 4 is its own category. We will add more categories later, I am certain. We also have extended support and potentially eventually implementation specific. I don't know how that's going to work, but there's a note about it, but we're not trying to deal with it just a second. That you can optionally have like features supported for, those can be reported as well as like extra features.
Yeah, there's also like some weird use cases, like there was that one I forget what the name of it, but there was that one guy who presented like a very narrow use case of like I think a few meetings ago, where they only implemented like 1 or 2 resources for like a very I forget what the exact thing was, like something about
Stunner is Stunner.
Yeah, Stunner.
And
there
only
you go,
implement gateway class and UDP route specifically. Yeah, that's a good point. We'll have to, I need to check in with him because I don't know if he's actually planning on adding TCP route support. I know that the project's pretty early on, but there's probably room for adding special profiles like for something like that. So good point on that one too.
Yeah, it's related to some of the thoughts I've had too. I think we may, as much as profiles are a very helpful concept that many people will fit in, I think it may be beneficial to have per resource instead of, groups of resources, just because like another example is someone may want to do a gRPC only gateway implementation. It's valid, but how that fits in, it's hard to predict.
Well,
It is a
I
little
mean,
hard to predict, but this leaves the door open. Like right now, we just know that these are going to be the more common ones, right? Or layer 7 is going to be the most common one. And there's going to be people who want to do multiple ones. So like Istio will likely do layer 4, layer 7, and mesh. But they really just refer to collections. So this GEP is 2 parts. Collecting together the tests that need to be run for a profile, which can be anything. And then reporting that, which is probably even the bigger component of this that we've needed for so long. So I hear you. And I would definitely have you say, like, come in here and say what, like, put some notes down in here with us and say, like, the things that you think are probably going to be things we need to address sooner rather than later. But the door is definitely open for us to have these profiles change names and to add more. That one that's like, I only do gRPC route. But they're just meant to be shorthand for what is currently like supported features and skip tests and stuff like that.
I mean, I think the starting 3 profiles are fine enough and will cover, the 80% use case. But yeah, we can always add more profiles, and like a gRPC profile. Like if you find that there are like multiple gateway, implementation that only do gRPC route implementations.
Or only UDP, as you said.
Or
yeah.
UDP, yeah, for example. But I also think that having like a per resource conformance section as well, to kind of capture like the full edge cases would also be beneficial in addition to profiles. So profiles is like a high level overview, but then you can kind of dig in. It's like, okay, what specific resources and extensions do you support?
Yeah. There's ideas coming from multiple people. Sanjay's popped something into the chat. Tagging tests with what resources they apply to, having some clever naming tests, so displaying the results can be smart, etc. Yeah. This is kind of we're in the provisional period. I would love to have you all like put in PRs to add the things and the changes and the thoughts, and they can just be notes, the to-do list items that you want to see taken care of because I want everybody to be included. I don't want anybody to feel like they're getting excluded from this and then suddenly they have to adhere to it. So please do jump in and make a PR.
Great, and it's really exciting to see this all coming together. I mean, this is something I've wanted in the project for a really long time. It sounds like there's some good feedback here that we can build on, but I mean, just to have this will be huge. So thanks to Shane and everyone working on this. I know there's been a few different people helping out. Yeah, it's great. But I know we've got a lot left on the agenda, so I'll keep on moving. I thank you, Antonio. I remember asking Antonio to come and give a little bit of an update about the service cider and IP address kept because it's entirely relevant for Gateway API. So I'm going to skip to that because we've left Antonio waiting for longer than I intended to. Thank you, Antonio. Maybe can you give just a high level overview of what you've been working on with this CAP and maybe for bonus points how it might be relevant to Gateway API?
So the main goal of the CAP started because for internet, each Kubernetes service has a cluster IP, okay, and the cluster IP is unique. So you cannot have 2 services with 2 clusters IP. This is achieved, the implementation is in the API server is a bitmap that is shared and a snapshot in etcd and has a lot of performance implication and scalability implications. So we have to use /112 for IPv6, for example. And I started working on this in 2 or 3 years ago. And the decision to be able to have assign IPs in a multi-cluster environments, keeping the concurrency and all these problems was to create a new object that was called IP address. So this new object will guarantee the uniqueness, okay? And the other idea that we were discussing with Tim Hawking is that he always wanted to grow from services and use Gateway as the expansion of services, because services was expected to do one thing, and then more use cases were coming, and then we tried to adapt services, and we end overloading services and with some incoherent things in the API. So this is the twofold idea of solving one of the services problems on IP assignment and introducing a new API that can be used by other APIs that are on top of services to solve current problems. Say this, right now I'm in half of the implementation. The only use case I have is for services. So I know Rob told me people is excited, but I really wanted to know the use cases, because you know how Kubernetes is. Once we implement something, and this start graduating, and then after that, changing something is going to be difficult. So right now, the only use case is this: is you create a service, the service assign an IP address, and this IP address object is referring the service back, and there is a controller maintaining the relation. When I started developing this, I said, well, what happens if somebody wants to use this IP address? These services belong to a service-side range. Sorry, I forgot that. What happens if something wants to create IP addresses here? What happens if, I don't know, we need more controllers and all these things? And I couldn't come up with any use case. So Rod told me people is excited and interested about this API. So if you have use cases, please comment or reach out or whatever to be able to adapt the API to all the use cases.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for good introduction. And I think the top thing that I'm interested in is this idea that you have an IP address resource, and that IP address resource has a parent reference that references the resource, usually services that an IP address would be attached to. But you can see one that feels similar in structure to Gateway API, but two, I think what I'm really interested in is the idea of being able to attach an in-cluster IP to a gateway directly with this. And I want to make sure we have a path forward for that. I think the API by definition allows for this. We just haven't really specified how we'll make this work. But I know that this feels very, very relevant to our longer term goals with Gateway. And there's some gaps right now, I think gaps or issues about the in-cluster gateway deployment. And right now that's just bundling a service type cluster IP with a gateway deployment. But I'm really interested if we can simplify that a little bit.
Yeah,
so
that's
that,
cool.
The main problem that they have now is the generation, okay? Because right now, when you create service, you assign a service sider to the cluster, right? And the idea is that you can create more service siders. And now is when I'm blocked right now, because we have another cap that is adding node siders, and we cannot overlap. And if we have this problem with points and kube proxy. You know, what happens if you have another controller? So I need to add some sort of mechanism to define the owner or the other.
yeah.
I think that you have that with the class or something, but I don't know. Oh, well.
Yeah. This all makes sense. I want to open it up. I know I've said some things, but anyone else have questions or comments about this cap? Okay, we'll leave it there. But thank you so much, Antonio. I can follow up offline later, and anyone else, please, if you have ideas for how you could use this, or what might be missing, really want to make sure, this is a really good opportunity for Gateway API. I think. And I want to make sure, like Antonio said, if we go too far down this in Kubernetes and we haven't considered every potential gateway API use case, we've missed a really golden opportunity here. And like what Keith is saying, you know, this feels especially relevant to mesh. Yeah, cool. All right.
Well,
Thanks,
thank you.
Antonio.
Thank you for having me.
All right, the next thing I wanted to just come back around to is this idea of configurable retries. I filed this a little bit ago. Actually, it's only 3 weeks, but I just wanted to bring it back up again in case anyone is looking for a project to take on. This is one that I think is non-controversial, would be a great addition to the API. You know, I think there's at least some people that would be interested in having it. You know, I'm sure somebody will eventually get to it, but if you're looking for some way to contribute that is actually adding a feature to this API, this one is available and wanted. So just throwing that out there for someone who might be interested in going through the full enhancement process. Feel free, if you are interested, to add a comment, but just another reminder that this one exists. All right, with that said, policy attachment. I think right now we are stuck on policy attachment naming, among other things. We could use some additional reviews on this PR because it, again, it represents a significant change to policy attachment. And thank you to everyone who's left comments. But I think one of the things that keeps on being a blocker is the word hierarchical, which, you know, the idea is there's direct policy attachment, which is this new simpler form, but there's also the hierarchical concept of you know, being able to specify overrides and defaults at different layers of the stack. And as you can imagine, that word is both painful to say and especially to spell. It's very easy to make typos when trying to spell that word. So I think I was the one who originally proposed the word hierarchical, but a different term would be very welcome. So for anyone who is better at naming things, definitely add any ideas on this gap. Yeah, I know there's additional feedback here. I don't know, Shane, do you have any more context? I've been out for a few days.
It's changed a lot since I originally approved it. I was hoping that this would go through more of an iterative process where we'd make smaller PRs. I probably need to look this one back over for more recent changes.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, this one is tricky because it's a big change, but it's a big change to an existing gap, so it's hard to like do it in small little chunks, or it's I don't know, but yeah, this is a massive PR, and there's lots to process in it. But as always, feedback is welcome. This feels like something that could change a lot, and I know we've had lots of discussions about the limitations of the current policy attachment model, so hopefully this can address at least some of them. Yeah. Okay, I'll keep on moving then. Just got a few minutes left here. Michael Beaumont added this one. I think this one was uncontroversial, but I wanted to actually, anytime that there's a test that is against conformance, I want to make sure that this works with a few implementations and doesn't get in the way of them. So usually I'll manually run conformance myself, but also it's helpful if others with implementations are able to comment and say, yeah, this makes sense to me. From my perspective, this seems like a very reasonable change. Has anyone, I think Arco, you mentioned that you had some flaky tests as well that may be related to this. So yeah, would be interested in others running these tests, confirming that this change is reasonable. seems like it should do nothing but fix things. Yeah, okay, so just if we can get a couple more comments on this PR itself to confirm, then I think this makes a lot of sense. This is 1760. All right, next up is in cluster gateway deployments. I wanted to come back to this, John. I've been out for a few days, but has much changed on this? I know this has got a lot of discussion and it's pretty broad.
I wouldn't say too much has changed. Like some of the minor syntax details change, but the core still remains there. That's about it. I think the biggest thing that changes, Nick seems to agree with most of it, so feel a little bit more
Can you go to the files change real quick?
confident about it.
Just want to see the top.
It's still, yeah, too provisional.
I mean, one thing that hasn't changed yet on it, but I think that there's some consensus is that it needs to be split up eventually. The only reason I kept it together is because I don't want to end up with one of those situations where you have 4 PRs and they're all intermingled. So I think keeping it together now, and then once we get a little bit of consensus, splitting out some of the details will make more sense, because like there's this new field infrastructure, and every aspect of it relies on that new field. And so until we get kind of some agreement on that, I think it's easier to keep them together. Once we get consensus on that, we can totally split them out. And certainly by the time this is like not provisional, we can do that. I just think it's a bit easier to keep it all in one place, because it's like this new field that has multiple usages kind of, so.
Cool. Yeah, it looks like it's changed even a bit since the last time I took a look. So I'll come back to this one this week, try and have another round of feedback.
Yeah, I will say that a lot of it actually, it started out as in cluster deployments. A lot of it I think actually applies to all deployments. So if you're Google or AWS or Azure or whoever, you should take a look as well, not just the in cluster folks.
So you're thinking that, did you say, did I hear you correctly? You're thinking this is going to end up being multiple GEPs?
Yeah, I think we'll probably have one on merging gateways, or an iteration on the existing one, maybe, because I think there may already be one. And then there's customization of in-cluster deployments, and possibly a third. I kind of forget. Certainly the merging part, I think, will be split out most likely.
Okay, cool. Thank you for putting the effort in on this one.
Cool.
Yeah, definitely. Please review and give feedback. It's a big gap, and there's a lot of ways it could go. So more feedback is better for sure.
Yeah, and your point about this kind of field or this kind of configuration applying not just to in cluster deployments. I mean, I think that would certainly be good if we could make it generic enough that it could apply to any gateway implementation, and it sounds like that's the way it's headed. So yeah, I'll follow up. Cool. All right, next one on the list, and I just added ones that look interesting. Yes, I added ones that look interesting to me, but as always, if something needs is attention, don't hesitate to add it to the agenda. This one is gRPC route method and service fields added tighter validation that was not compatible with regular expressions. So this PR takes that validation that applied to every kind of match type because it was in the CRD, and moves it to the webhook instead, where it can be specific to a given path type, a match type. This seems fine to me. It will actually result in loosening our validation somewhat. But just a heads up that this is a somewhat significant change to gRPC route. So if we can get more eyes on it, that would be helpful. And then I think, oh, wow, we just barely got enough time that we cover this last one. Okay, no, we don't have enough time for this, other than that it exists. So yeah, this is a big one. Yeah, I know we discussed this. Nick had some ideas, and I think Arco has updated based on Nick's ideas in the previous meeting. But it would be very good to circle back since, this gap has changed, this PR has changed significantly in the past week. But we don't have enough time to discuss it today. So, yeah.
I have a real
All
quick
right, thanks.
thing.
Yeah.
Just real quick, we don't have anything scheduled yet, but be on the lookout. We are going to try to schedule probably another one of these at some point where it's earlier in the day. Thank you all for coming to it, but like, just keep a lookout in Slack and stuff like that, because this, we're probably not gonna make it a regular thing just yet, but we will make a future one, an early morning one again, and just see how the attendance holds up.
Cool. All right, thanks everyone. See you tomorrow or next week.